Well, thank you very much, Amber. That's great. You're doing a brilliant job, and I think it is very intimidating being up here looking out at this audience, particularly because the lights are in our way. We can't really see you. We just see this mass of humans. So it's a delight to be here. I'm going to just moderate a discussion today with the Chancellor and my new friend Tom, who I met this morning. And I'm going to start with macro and the investment environment that we're in. We've heard some great speeches earlier on today with some actually very interesting things that are being announced, which I'd really love to get into. And if I start with you, Chancellor, what are your top priorities in this very competitive world where every single country right now is desperately trying to attract investment? This is not a UK problem, this is a global problem. And so what are your top priorities for ensuring that Britain is regarded as an attractive and stable destination for global investment, given that backdrop?
Yes, well, I think that we've got a brilliant story to tell, and myself and Peter and the Prime Minister and all of our ministers have been doing that over the last year. I think on day 2 of your job, Peter, you flew to the US, and on day 3 you flew from the US to China, and then within something like 72 hours you were back in the UK again. I was in Washington last week for the IMF annual meetings, but whilst I was there I also met with lots of investors, lots of US banks and financial services businesses to extol what we are doing here. And the story that I tell is that Britain is open to business, open to investment, open to trade, and open to talent. And that does differentiate us in the world today, where increasingly countries are reverting inwards and not open to trade and not open to talent. We have just doubled our global growth talent visas, 3 types of visas. One that Patrick is leading on around academics and research groups from top universities in the world, and say, make your teams here, bring your teams to Britain. We've got fantastic universities. We're increasingly good at spinning out companies from our universities. We've expanded the number of visas for people from the top universities in the world, both expanded the number of universities that we recognise, catching up with what are now the best universities in the world, and then also expanding the number of people who can take advantage of that, and also doubling the number of visas for high potential individuals and entrepreneurs. And we launched this just last week already. The inquiries have been flooding in. And we've got Jason Stockwood here, the new Minister for Investment, and he's leading on that work, getting investment directly into Britain, but also the new concierge service focused on getting financial services firms to choose Britain as a place to invest. And the trade deals that we're doing means that when you invest in Britain, you can then export all around the world on preferential trade deals. You can export to the US with the best terms of trade of any other country in the world. You can export to India on the basis of the best trade deal that any country has with India, and you can export to the EU under the new change relationship that Keir Starmer and this government have brought to our relations with our nearest neighbours and trading partners. And so, I think our message is increasingly clear. We are an open, trading country that welcomes investment and welcomes talent to Britain. And that is the message that all of us as a government and ministers and mayors as well, because we know that it is mayors and local leaders that know their areas best. And that's why increasingly on trade trips, either with government ministers or doing their own trade missions around the world, we're able to get that investment into Britain.
Thank you, Chancellor. So, Tom, we've heard at least 3 times this morning about Sports Quarter, which is the name for the 130-acre, I think, site, something like that.
We hope, yep.
Give or take, right? Which is huge. And the plans, which I know are sort of still being developed, and the progress is hopefully by 2030, 31, it'll be open. You're American. Right? You've got a lovely Birmingham City pin there. I love the fact you're a Blues supporter. You obviously liked it so much. You did the thing of buying the club. What as a major investor and somebody that is really making things happen in a regional centre, what are the signals that you look for from government when making an investment?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And the plans are pretty well set as to what we're going to do in the sports quarter. We're just, playing the media game and slowly leaking them out. We've got a few things to announce today. But I think what we look for in making any investment anywhere in the world is an economy that is open to outside investment, where we won't be disadvantaged vis-a-vis internal investors, and where our capital won't be unduly impaired when we, seek to pursue those opportunities. And I think what we've seen and what we've heard from this government is one that they want to be very collaborative. They want to be very supportive. They're pushing hard to ensure that the process of something as ambitious as what we're seeking to pursue will happen without significant delays, where we can collaborate with the mayor's office and the other important constituents in our jurisdiction to help push things forward. Because time is just another cost to any project, and ultimately it delays the unveiling of something that we think will have an enormous impact, not just for a football club, but for a city, a region, and a country. And I think all those factors together combine to make it a pretty compelling one, coupled with prior commitments for things like HS2 and new commitments, thanks to the Chancellor, for increased transport that really transform what seemed to be a pretty crazy idea initially into one that starts to make a lot of sense. And people are like, oh, that's actually, pretty compelling to have a site that will be so close to so many different metropolitan areas.
Yeah, because the West Midlands area, I think, if I'm right, is around 6.5 million people.
Yes.
Which is not that different from London.
And everyone I know wants to buy property in the Cotswolds, I think, following in the footsteps of some famous American entertainers. So that's just on our doorstep, and ever closer with the transport improvements.
I'm sure the people in the Cotswolds will welcome more people to live there.
I hear a lot of people saying they want more Americans. Yeah.
I'm not going to comment on that. I did actually, I was very taken by Mayor Parker's note that it's going to be 38 minutes. That actually is transformational, and we'll come back to transport in a minute, because I do think transport unlocks a lot of things, and I know that that's been a huge focus of the current government. Chancellor, if I could just ask you, when you talked earlier, you sounded actually very passionate about the importance of regional investment, and that really does differentiate you, I think, and the administration from some predecessors of many parties, actually. What is it that personally motivates you to so strongly champion regional growth? And what would you like the outcome to be from this summit? What do you want people to do differently or think differently following this summit?
Well, thank you for saying that. You're right, it is something I care passionately about, because I just think that as a country we've missed out on so many opportunities for such a long time. I've been the MP for over 15 years now in Leeds West, and to be honest, I've sort of got quite sick and tired of opportunities in my part of the world being overlooked. We are the biggest city in Western Europe without a mass transit system. And, actually, even before I was an MP, there were plans on the table for one. And then, because capital spending was the first thing to be cut at the first sign of trouble, it just kept getting cut and delayed. And I changed the fiscal rules in the UK last year to separate out how we treat day-to-day spending and capital spending. So even when, there are tricky budgets, and, we might have one of those coming up, I can't just cut capital to make the numbers add up. And that is so important, because it means we're not going to make the next budget even harder by not investing in the things that are actually going to deliver a return to our country. And investments like Tom's in Birmingham City does depend on good transport links, but that's the same in every other region. Before the election, I went with Andy and with Steve to Stockport, to your mayoral development corporation, something that you'd worked with Bob Kerslake, former chief executive of Sheffield City Council, who helped develop these mayoral development corporations, which now lots of our mayors are using to parcel together land, to make investments and to develop areas like what you're saying, one of the poorest parts of the country where your football club is, and invest not just in sports infrastructure or retail, but also the housing. But it's so crucial that you can then get people like, I think, Andy, it's 8 minutes from Stockport to Manchester. The rents and the prices of the flats and the houses there are much cheaper than in the city centre, but you can access those jobs. And you're absolutely right that transport, combined with investment in housing and investment in job creation, is so important. But, you know, the government aren't going to invest in a football club, but we can invest in the things to make a success.
Yeah.
It's yours.
That would be an announcement.
You can imagine if we chose one football club over the other. So, you know, but we are facilitating it because we can see the huge benefit it will have in regenerating our country. And that's the same with what Andy's doing at Old Trafford, what Steve's doing at Everton, what Tracy's doing with Elland Road. Kim, what are you doing about sports in the North East? But, you know, these investments are absolute, watch this space. But you've got the brilliant stuff. In fact, the only place that I've been to more than my own constituency, I think, is Gateshead, or possibly Derby and Clares, because there are huge opportunities all around the country. You know, the stuff we're doing, Claire, in the East Midlands around nuclear energy is phenomenal. You know, the stuff with Rolls-Royce, but also the stuff with fusion. It's just so exciting, and those are not opportunities you're going to get in London and the South East. Those are our only opportunities that we can develop in some of our industrial heartlands and former industrial heartlands. So, you know, governments that look at a too small a part of a country, too small a number of industries, too few people, are going to get the sort of growth performance we've had the last 15 years. Dire. We've got to turn that around, and that means doing things differently, and that means growth everywhere, because talent is equally distributed across our country, but sadly, opportunity isn't yet. But that is what I'm determined to turn around, because if we can grow our cities at a faster rate, our city regions and other parts of our country at the same rate as the most successful cities in Europe and around the world, our economy would be tens of billions of pounds bigger. Now, I think, you know, Andy, your mayoral combined authorities run the longest, and you have got high growth in Greater Manchester, but you've been constrained by the lack of infrastructure investment in your city. I've heard that. We are investing in it, and we are turning that around. But the mayoral model and giving more powers to the mayors can unlock huge opportunity in this country. And I think my approach, Kia's approach, is about partnership, genuine partnership between central government, local leadership, regional leadership, and businesses as well. And everyone's got a part to play in that. No one can do it on their own, but I think we've found a good model for working together to deliver the prosperity we want to see, broadly based across the UK.
So I wish that had been the last question I asked, because I don't think we're going to go up from here. But I do think we should just stop now. I do think, actually, I was chatting with one of the mayors earlier, Oliver Coppard, who's the mayor of South Yorkshire, and he was telling me about another aspect which we haven't talked about, the investment that you've helped catalyse the growth for the reopening of the Doncaster Sheffield Airport. And he said something really interesting, which was that actually in the local community, just opening the airport has led to this sort of rebound of hope, because it feels like people are willing to invest in that local region, which, you know, it's Sheffield, Rotherham, Doncaster, other places, which I have a home near there in Derbyshire. And actually, I think it's right. There hasn't been much hope for the communities of that part of the world. And so small investments, I think the unlock from capital from the Treasury was something like 30 million. That catalyses everything else that follows later, and then that catalyses hope and growth and opportunity. So I think you're onto something here. And I actually think that's the story to tell. The story to tell is going to be for international investors, and my job, I oversee an investment firm outside America, the story to tell is going to be how it's not just London and it's not just the Cotswolds, even though that's lovely, though full, with very tiny roads. But it's going across the whole country, so it's catalysing growth across 68 million people, not just catalysing growth for 8 million, which is the London story.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Tom, why did you invest in Birmingham?
I don't know. No.
Had you been to Birmingham?
There were a variety of factors. I think one, it was a city that was a majority minority. It had a substantial immigrant population. It had been underinvested in for a long period of time. There was this sense that it was a city that needed to be reawoken. And many of those things were true of the football club that catalyzed our first, but not our only investment in sport here. We're invested in the Birmingham Phoenix, who plays right here in Edgbaston. We're invested in the Birmingham City Panthers, which is the women's netball team. And proud of each of those investments and proud to continue to develop deeper ties into Birmingham generally because we believe in the city and its potential. But what really turned our head were two things that existed from a national government perspective and a local government perspective. The first was HS2, which we spoke about, and the ability to connect Birmingham and London in a way that effectively at the same amount of time is connecting Greenwich, Connecticut, and Midtown Manhattan. People say, well, it's too far. I'm like, well, not too far to go from Greenwich to Midtown. And arguably, to go to a concert in our new venue, it will be faster for me to go from London to a concert in our new development than it is from my apartment to any of the venues in New York on a Friday night. So it's actually quite compelling in that regard. And then locally, the opportunity to buy the first parcel of land from the BCC that gave us that initial plot that we needed, around which we could build the rest of our purchases and to begin to pursue this opportunity. And when you say, okay, what's the impact of that? Well, it's 16,000 plus jobs during the construction period. It's 14,000 plus jobs on an ongoing basis. It's 760 million pounds a year of direct economic impact. And we haven't even finished talking about all that we'll do on the site, and we're already at those figures. And what we're doing as part of this is to try to celebrate Birmingham in its entirety. This is not just about our football club, it's about the city, and we believe very strongly in that. And to that end, the stadium design, which will be released formally in about a month, has been awarded to the firm that Thomas Heatherwick founded, working with Manica and Stephen Knight, to bring in a group of stadium experts, exceptional design and creativity from Heatherwick, and obviously Stephen brings great storytelling, great enthusiasm. He is a rather vociferous blues fan, so he brings that passion and energy. But I think we're not going to run from the past of the city of 1,000 trades. We're going to celebrate it. And that's celebrating the entire city, the entire region, in a way that can demonstrate you can go from what had been to what will be seamlessly without escaping where you were. And I think that's an important connection that needs to be respected.
So my mum was from west of here and from Smethwick, so I'm very keen on seeing Birmingham and the whole West Midlands regenerate, and the idea of connecting the past to the future, I think is a very good one. We've been very eloquent on skills and universities, and I think that also plays into the regional theme, because the universities are such powerhouses in this country, really. We punch way above our weight relative to other Western European countries. So that's brilliant. Obviously, this is a great region, but all of the regions are very strong. Housing critical, transport critical. So this, I think, is well known. The one thing I think we haven't really touched on, but I think is going to be critically important going forward, is energy prices. And how do we, you mentioned at the end of your speech about housing having affordable energy. That's probably the biggest unlock to growth, I think. What can we do there? Or do you want to defer to Ed, who's coming up later?
It is a problem. I'm not going to shy away from it. A combination of a lack of investment over a long period of time in our infrastructure, combined with what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine, has meant our energy prices are too high for consumers, and more of people's incomes are going on their bills, and that means less money to spend in the rest of the economy, and too high for businesses. And if you think about some of the big growth sectors in advanced manufacturing, in data and technology, they are energy intensive industries, and we need more energy, which means more investment into the grid and to energy production. It's very important that when we invest in things like solar and wind farms, which are really, really important, that they can actually get connected onto the grid. No point in building them to then pay them to not be working. It's why also we are putting so much investment into nuclear energy, because we need that baseload electricity supply. Hinkley, it's sort of, it's progressing. It's taken too long, but we've learned from Hinkley, and the investment in Sizewell will be on a much shorter timetable, and then that commitment with Rolls-Royce to invest in small modular reactors. So we recognise that, we've done the extension of the supercharger, lower prices for some of the most energy intensive industries will be coming in, but I'm not going to pretend that we've fixed all the problems there, but I think because I'm not pretending, hopefully you can see that I am determined to do more to tackle this problem, both for consumers, because it is still, for households, the biggest concern is energy bills. The cost of living and energy bills are still people's biggest worry, and I recognise that it's one of the facts that impedes our productivity and our ability to secure investment to the UK. We were incredibly pleased with the investments we were able to announce at the US Investment Summit. But truth be told, many of those investors said we would have invested more if your energy prices were lower and we could get connections quicker. I've taken on board that feedback. We know that we need to do more about it. So watch this space.
Excellent. We've got 17 seconds left. I have to ask you, budget's coming up. There's obviously going to be a lot of interest.
8.
What can people expect, not in terms of tax rises or not, but in terms of measures to support growth?
Yeah, look, we've got to grow the economy, and the budget isn't somehow a separate exercise to growing the economy. The OBR have done what's called this supply side review over the course of the summer, looking at our productivity performance over the last 15 years and using that to extrapolate going forward. I don't think that the past has to define our future. That's why we are doing things differently. That's why we are deregulating. It's why we're overturning the planning system. It's why we're reforming the pension system. It's why we are backing all regions of the UK with the capital spending that we're putting in, because I'm determined to defy those projections and grow our economy quicker. We also know, and the OBR I think are going to be pretty frank about this, that things like austerity, the cuts to capital spending and Brexit have had a bigger impact on our economy than even was projected back then. That's why we are unashamedly rebuilding our relations with the European Union to reduce some of those costs that were, in my view, sort of needlessly added to businesses since 2016 and since we've sort of formally left a few years ago. The budget will continue to focus on growth. I recognise that businesses have absorbed tax increases and other challenges over the last year, the geopolitical uncertainty, the higher barriers to trade, and I want to make sure that this budget is pro-growth whilst also addressing the deep challenges that we face in ensuring we've got stability in our economy, because fiscal stability and economic stability isn't somehow a separate objective to growth. We all know that because we saw what happened a few years ago when a previous government made unfunded tax cuts. And if we came out of the budget with plans that investors in government bonds and financial markets recognised didn't add up, we will see what happened to Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng happen again, which is borrowing costs go up for consumers and for businesses. We'll see turbulence in financial markets, which is a disincentive to invest. So I will ensure that the sums add up, that we have that buffer against future shocks, but as much as possible through both our tax and spending policy, but also crucially through all those other levers of economic policy, because economic policy isn't just what you do on budget day, it's what you do the other 364 days a year when you are deregulating, when you are unblocking the planning system, when you are backing businesses, where you are unlocking capital in our capital markets. All of those things are also important for growth, and I hope that businesses see, despite some of the difficult decisions that we've had to make this last year to stabilise the public finances, that we are doing everything we can to back Britain, to go out and back for Britain, and to bring investment into our country to turn around the performance that has not been good enough the last 15 years. And I know, because I've been around the country, I've met so many businesses, been to so many brilliant universities, met so many entrepreneurs, that there's absolutely no reason why we can't return to those growth rates of the past with the right partnership that I think that we are developing between central government, our local and regional leaders, and our brilliant investors, businesses, entrepreneurs as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. We're passing over to Amber now.